Hello, good morning, class. Let's wait for a minute or so for other students to join and then we will start the class. Okay, so I'll just start and the others can join as we go on. So, like we talked about regulatory affairs in the last class, what regulatory affairs is, what are the regulatory bodies, what are the regulatory submissions, and more briefing about what regulatory affairs is. We got an overall picture of what we are getting into in the next sessions. So today we are going to talk about pharmaceutical legislations and ethics. Because when you talk about regulatory affairs, it's majorly about ethics and laws, okay, without which you cannot regulate something. You need to lay down several regulations and guidelines in order to make sure that those guidelines and regulations are being followed and that the process is regulated. Okay, so pharmaceutical industry doesn't just manufacture products, it manufactures trust, right? When a patient takes a medicine, they're placing their life in hands of scientists, companies, and regulators. That trust is protected by laws, ethical practices, and international standards. So, in today's class, we will cover key regulations that govern the pharmaceutical industry globally and in India. We will talk about good manufacturing practices, good laboratory practices, good clinical practices, along with code of ethics, which will cover the ethical responsibilities of regulatory affair professional, and we'll take up a case study on regulatory non-compliance. By the end of this class, you'll have a clearer understanding of how legislation and ethics ensure patient safety, product quality, and global pharmaceutical integrity. Okay, so let's start with this is your agenda for today's class. Oh, okay. Also, another thing, we are dividing this pharmaceutical legislations and ethics into three sessions. So today we are talking about the one that are listed on the slide, and in the later sessions we will talk about specific regulatory regulations specific to the countries. For example, US FDA, we will take up US FDA and we will talk only about what regulations are laid down by the US FDA, what are the regulatory bodies that are governing, regulatory people who are in the US FDA maintaining the regulations and ensuring compliance. Then we'll take up EMA, CIDESCO. We'll take up these regulatory bodies individually and talk about them in next sessions. Okay. So let's start with the key regulations governing pharmaceuticals. Okay. So the key regulations governing pharmaceuticals can be both. It can be international regulatory bodies or it can be your national regulatory landscape. So when we talk about international regulatory bodies, there are US FDA, which regulates drug approval, labeling, post-market surveillance in the US. In the US, they set strict rules on drug approval, quality control, and post-market surveillance. For example, no medicine can be marketed in the US without FDA clearance. If a drug is not getting FDA clearance, it cannot be under any circumstance be marketed in the US market. Okay. Then is your EMA, which is your European Medicine Agency. It centralizes drug approval across the European continent, and it ensures that the centralized approval has been granted across 27 EU member states. So if a single drug is getting approval, then the drug has access to the entire European market. Okay. Then is your ICH, which is your International Council for Harmonization. Um, ICH basically harmonizes technical requirement across regions. This is why a clinical trial in India can often be accepted in Europe or Japan if it follows ICH guidelines. Okay. And lastly is your WHO, which provides global guidelines and pre-qualification standards for countries which do not fall under stringent regulatory bodies, or the countries which are, you know, classified as raw markets. Those countries have WHO, which lays down the guidelines and pre-qualification standards for regulations in those countries. Okay, but for stringent markets like US, Europe, we have specific regulatory bodies like US FDA and EMA. Apart from these, we have PMDA Japan, we have TGA Australia. So only in countries which are classified as raw markets or non-stringent regulatory markets, they have WHO, which provides global guidelines and pre-qualification standards for those countries. Okay. Then we'll talk about key regulations in India or Indian specific framework. So when we talk about Indian specific framework, there is your Drug and Cosmetic Act 1940 and Drug and Cosmetic Act Rules 1945. You can all read about what Drug and Cosmetic Act is in your on the internet or in the textbooks, because it's very detailed there, and it's something that people who pursuing B Pharma needs to study. Okay. Then is your Schedule M, Schedule Y. Schedule M lays down the GMP standards for manufacturing. Schedule Y lays down the guidelines for clinical trial regulations. Then is your CDSCO. CDSCO is National Regulatory Authority, which it's India's national regulatory authority, and DCGI is head of CDSCO, which who is responsible for approving new drugs and clinical trials. Okay, so this is a brief about regulations in India. These frameworks together ensure only safe and effective and quality assured medicine reaches patients. Okay. If you have any questions so far, um, you can type them in the chat box and I'll try to address that. If not, we will talk about the Valsartan recall, which happened in 2018 due to cancer-causing impurities in blood pressure medicine. Okay. If you do not have any questions regarding the key regulations, I'll talk about the Valsartan recall that happened in 2018. It'll give you a better understanding of why regulations are important in pharmaceutical industry. Okay, so what happened in Valsartan recall was certain batches of Valsartan, a widely used blood pressure medicine, were found to contain NDMA, which is your N-nitro dimethylamine, and NDEA, which is N-nitro diethylamine. Okay, both of which are classified as probable human carcinogens. This contamination happened because of changes in the manufacturing process. There were certain changes that were implemented in the manufacturing processes which wasn't registered at an overseas facility, and it went undetected for some time. Regulators then, like US FDA, EMA, or CDSCO in India, had to issue recalls across multiple countries in order to stop the manufacturing and marketing of the specific valsartan drug. Okay. So because the manufacturing processes changes in the manufacturing processes were overlooked, it led to the recall of valsartan. Okay. So the recall highlighted three key lessons about the role of regulations. The first one is your quality oversight is critical. You need to make sure that even small changes in raw material sourcing or processes can introduce dangerous impurities. Therefore, GMP ensures such risks are minimized. So, if a manufacturing premise is GMP compliant, has a GMP certificate, which that means that the uh, risk of having a quality oversight is minimized and the product quality is maintained. Next comes your global vigilance. Global vigilance, where medicines are manufactured and supplied internationally, so regulatory harmonization and cooperation between agencies is essential. And who maintains this harmonization? It's ICH, it's WHO, it's all the regulatory bodies that are responsible in the import and export approvals of the drug to be marketed in the country. Okay. And lastly is your patient safety. Regulations exist to protect patients. Okay. The most important reason why regulations are important in pharmaceutical industries is to maintain patient safety. Okay, so regulation exists to protect patients. Without regulatory frameworks like GMP, GLP, GCP, dangerous products or adulterants or products that are not compliant or do not have the quality check could reach millions of people. So therefore, drug recalls like Walsartan clearly shows us that regulations are not just rules on paper, but a safeguard for public health. Okay, I hope the example for Walsartan is clear. Um, and okay, like in the example of Walsartan, we talk about GMP. We'll talk about GMP in more detail now. So, okay, good manufacturing practices. I hope everyone's heard of good manufacturing practices and why a GMP certificate is important in a pharmaceutical industry or for drug approvals. It's because GMP ensures medicines are produced consistently and with quality. It covers facilities, equipments, personnel, and documentation. Okay. So the key GMP principles are hygienic facility, which are controlled environments free from contamination. Then is your equipment calibration or equipment design, which talks about how machines must consistently perform as intended. If there is a tablet press machine, it needs to perform as intended. It cannot be not calibrated and perform in a way that it shouldn't, right? Then is your trained staff. Skilled operators reduce human errors, so a proper staff training or hiring of trained staff is important in a pharmaceutical in a manufacturing unit. Then is your in-process quality check, where you need to make sure that random sampling is done to ensure quality and consistency. Then batch records, which will help you have full traceability of every raw material processes and outcome. And lastly is your validation, um, wherein we perform processes where we make sure that the processes are proven to work the same way every time, that there are no deviations from what the process is intended for. Okay. So GMP makes sure that the product safety, efficacy, and reproducibility is maintained. If a manufacturing plant is meeting all the requirements laid down, then the external auditing company or a competent authority issues a GMP certificate. GMP certificate can be an international GMP certificate if the manufacturing plant is being inspected by a authority outside of the country. For example, take for example Sun Pharma. Sun Pharma is an Indian-based company which can have both certificates. A local certificate uh, wherein the Indian authority inspects the GMP site and provides the certification that yes, the site is compliant with the guidelines and the regulations laid down. Also, a European authority can inspect the site in India and issue a GMP certificate, which is an international certificate. if an European authority is inspecting the site, that certificate is easily available on Udra websites. You can type in the name of the company and the country where the company is based, and you can find out the GMP certificates there. Um, I'll try to show you one GMP certificate towards the end of this session so that you understand what a GMP certificate is, what it looks like. Next is your GLP certificate, which is your good laboratory practice. So before human testing, drugs undergo non-clinical lab studies, which include toxicology, pharmacology, safety in animals, etc. So GLP ensures these studies are credible and reliable. Okay. So GLP has certain principles like study plans and protocols wherein well-documented objectives and methods are required. Then you require qualified personnel with proper training or properly trained scientists. Then calibrated instruments for reliable measurements, data integrity where raw data must be recorded, not manipulated, and quality assurance units, independent audits of studies. Okay, so take for example, a company falsifies toxicity data to speed up approval. The drug moves to human trials and causes harm. So, in order to prevent that, in order to prevent the falsified toxicity data, the GLP, having a GLP certificate makes sure that no unethical practices being enforced by making sure that people who are responsible for issuing a GLP certificate are accountable for what they are auditing. Okay, so after GMP, GLP certificate is important. GLP is your good laboratory practices. Then comes your good clinical practices. Sorry. Then comes your good clinical practices, which is your GCP certificate. So once the safety is proven in animals, human trials begin, and GCP governs the human trials. GCP principles covers protection of participants, their safety and rights come first. Then, if a participant is willing to undergo the clinical trial, then informed consent is presented to the participant in order for them to know the risks, benefits, and alternatives of the clinical trial. Then there is an ethics committee review. Ethics committee review is very important because without that, no trial can start without independent approval. Okay. Then the credible data. Results must be verified and authentic. You cannot hamper with your clinical trial data. Otherwise, once got, you have to face CDSCO. If we are specifically talking about India, then FDA and the drug might be recalled or a lawsuit might be filed because these are things that are very sensitive and you cannot just go around falsifying the data and hampering the data or just to prove a fact. And the last one is your protocol compliance. Deviations can invalidate entire study. So before a clinical trial study is implemented or started, there is a clinical trial protocol which is being reviewed by multiple authorities in order to make sure that the clinical trial performed according to the protocol. Any deviations to the clinical trial protocol can invalidate the entire study. So we need to make sure that the clinical trial is as per the clinical trial protocol laid before the regulatory bodies. Okay. Very easy example of understanding GCP is during COVID-19 vaccine trials, GCP played a critical role. Volunteers had to be fully informed and data had to withstand global scrutiny. If there were any falsification or tampering of the data, then we might not have had COVID-19 vaccine. and there might have been a greater risk than greater benefits. So again, GCP is a important certificate. It it can happen sometimes that the manufacturing plant who's received a GMP certificate might not have the GCP certificate or GLP certificate because they're outsourcing their clinical trials or laboratory practices to a certain third party. So we need to make sure that the third party has a proper GCP or GLP certificates. When all these three come together, the approval becomes easier for that drug. Okay. Then we will talk about code of ethics in regulatory affairs. Okay, before we move with code of ethics in regulatory affairs, if you have any questions regarding the GMP, GCP, and GLP certificates, please raise them in the chat box. If not, we will continue with the class in a minute. Okay, has anyone of you seen a GMP certificate issued by the competent authorities of Europe, like Germany, France, etc.? If yes, please raise a thumbs up. If not, please let me know in the chat box so I can make a decision about what kind of GMP certificate I need to present to you. If you've seen a GMP certificate, please raise a thumbs up. If you haven't, just okay. Shatabdi has answered no, which is okay. I would like more class participation here. If you have not seen a GMP certificate, I'm more than happy to show you a GMP certificate. But if you have seen it, I would like to know if you've seen it. Okay, so I guess majority of students haven't seen a GMP certificate. So okay, we will talk about a GMP certificate later in the class. I'll try to present a GMP certificate to you. Okay, I'll show the GMP certificate, but do you have any questions regarding GMP, GLP, GCP? Because I've only briefed you about these certificates. I've informed you about the guidelines that you have to study or refer to in order to understand what these guidelines are and how are they related to GMP, GLP, and GCP. In the next class, I will share you the reference guidelines and everything. So if you have any questions till now, please type that in the chat box, and we will move with Code of Ethics and Regulatory Affairs. Okay, so moving on with the good clinic Code of Ethics and Regulatory Affairs. So beyond technical rules, regulatory affairs is rooted in ethics. Okay, we've talked about a lot of technical rules like GMP, GLP, GCP, regulations, etc. But apart from technical rules, regulatory affairs is rooted in ethics, and regulatory professionals are the gatekeepers of patient safety. The ethical principles involves integrity and honesty, which means no falsification or manipulation of data is allowed. Then transparency, having clear communication with the uh, stakeholders like regulators, patients, and companies is important, along with patient-centric approach, which deals with safety over profit any day. And then is your confidentiality of respecting sensitive data that's been presented to you. Then avoiding conflict of interest. Personal gain should never influence professional decisions. Accountability, owning professional decisions, and not blaming people for the outcomes that you or your company was responsible for. And continuous professional development and guided by RAPs and other professional bodies. The RAPs is your regulatory authority professional body, and you need to make sure that the regulatory professional who's dealing with regulation, dealing with the documentation or the approvals or the marketing need to be equipped with the knowledge of ever evolving regulations. He shouldn't be, he shouldn't be laid back, or he needs to be very upfront and make sure that he knows what is changing, what regulations are being implemented, what are the minute changes that has happened, how it will impact the approval, etc. So ethics is the invisible backbone of regulations, and without it, laws are just paperwork. So make sure when you're working in regulatory affair departments, you maintain a code of ethic, and nobody should question your ethical. Nobody should, question your ethics, because you need to make sure that you know what you're doing. Okay. So that is about code of ethics in regulatory affairs. Then we'll talk about a case study of Ranbaxy scandal that has happened uh, in 2013. Uh, and what were the repercussions of that, and how, what, yeah, we'll basically talk about the repercussions and what happened in the Ranbaxy scandal. So let's move to that. Okay, context. It is India's largest generic drug manufacturer, used to be India's largest generic drug manufacturer. The issue was US FDA discovered falsified safety and quality data. Okay, so Ranbaxy was admitted to falsifying safety data submitted to the US FDA. They What exactly did they do? They fabricated test results. GMP failure happened. Poor documentation was there, which led to a $500 million fine, one of the largest ever. Bans on products, ban on product sales in US, reputational collapse, and eventual acquisition by Sun Pharma. We've all heard the news of how Sun Pharma acquired Ranbaxy. So this was one reason why it was acquired by Sun Pharma. And then there was ethical breach. Patients were exposed to unsafe drugs, and trusted Indian pharma took a hit. Okay, so the Ranbaxy laboratory case basically teaches us that regulatory non-compliance is not just about penalties; it can destroy a company's credibility permanently. Okay, so what would you have done differently if you were a regulatory affair officer at Ranbaxy? Uh, how would you have prevented this? If you have any answers, you can write them in the chat box so that I know if you are understanding how data can be falsified, how it can compromise with the manufacturer's, reputation, and how it can be prevented. So, one liner, anything, whatever you feel can be could have been a solution to this situation. You can either raise your hand, I'll give you the opportunity to talk about it, or you can just type a solution or your suggestion in the chat box of how this could have been prevented. You know about GMP, GLP, GCP, you know about regulations. So what do you think could have been done differently in order to prevent what happened with Ranbaxy? Do none of you have any resolution how it could have been prevented? I would like your input regarding the same, so that I know that you understood what we have discussed in this session today. How falsified safety and quality data could have been prevented and not, not registered in the first place. So anything that you think could have been done, please feel free to write that. Raise your hand. If not, we'll move towards concluding this class and with the GMP certificate. Give me a minute to show you the GMP certificate. I'll show you how you can, access GMP certificates on the UDRA website. So just a second. Okay. Okay, so I'm guessing my screen is visible to you all. Could you just give a thumbs up if it's visible? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Chatabi, for the thumbs up. Okay, so when you write UDRA GMP is your GMP database present in the European directory or for public. So when you write UDRA GMP, you'll come across public layout UDRA GMP or UDRA GMP public layout. You click on these UDRA GMP public layouts and it will direct you to the UDRA GMP database where you can find documents. You can find manufacturing licenses of companies here. You can find out GMPs. You can find out active pharmaceutical ingredient GMP. You can find out pharmaceutical final product GMP, etc. So once you see this, you need to click on read only access to UDRA GMDP, where here there are few options. There API reg, WDA, GDP, sites, MIA, and GMP. This gives you manufacturing licenses. This gives you GMP. So since we are talking about good manufacturing practices, let's just understand what happens. So I've clicked on GMP and this page opens up. So instead of non-compliance report, we click on the GMP certificates and this opens. Okay. Certificate number, if you know the expiry or the issuance date, you put it here. Dance number is given by the manufacturing plant. Mostly we do not have all these data. We only have the name of the company and have the country where the company is situated. Say, for example, we have a company called, give me a name of company, anybody in the chat box. We'll check if that company has been inspected by a European authority and if that GMP is available on this database. Okay. Just write down a company and a country you know of in the chat box. More laboratories. Is that what you are referring to, Vinayshri? Okay, let's try if we can find more laboratory. We will put in the name here, Amy. Can you tell me the company, country where it is located? Okay, we can try to put in India here. And you search. So, Merck laboratory hasn't been inspected by European authority based in India for the site that's based in India. So, there are no results here. And if we put in Germany, let's say Germany, and we search, array, let's start here. If we try Germany here, let's search. Again, there are no, let's just try. Okay, so yeah, I've typed Merck in Germany, and these are all your GMPs that have been issued for country for Merck in Germany. Okay, so this Merkel Healthcare, Merck. Okay, I cannot see a Merck laboratory here, but let's just go with the GMP certificate. Okay, before that, you can see here, this is your GMP certificate number. This is a document reference number for user documents. This is document type, GMP certificate. This is your manufacturing license number. This is your organized OMS, organization identifier. This is a location identifier. This is the site name. This is the site address. This is the city where the plant is located. This is the postcode and Germany. And here you can find the inspection end date. So GMP certificates are valid for 3 years from the date of issuance. In certain cases, for example, when COVID happened, the expiry was extended to 1 year because no inspections could be conducted during that time. So whatever changes are made in the GMP, it's mentioned in the GMP certificate. I'll give you a very nice example of. Okay. Can anyone tell me where Mylan laboratories are located? France, we'll search it here. What is somebody saying? Estella's Pharma, Japan. Okay, we'll check Estella's Pharma also. But before that, let's look at Mylan Laboratories as. So, okay. I'm finding a specific GMP for you to refer to. Just give me a minute. Okay, yes. This is the right GMP for the reference. So as you can see, this is National Agency for the Safety of Medicine and Healthcare Products, health products. And here you can see the manufacturer's name written with the site address and the OMS and location ID. And it starts with for the knowledge gained during inspection of this manufacturer, the latest of which was conducted on 2022 9/16. Could you calculate the expiry of this GMP from the date that is being given here? Please write the expiry in the chat box so I know that you know the validity period for this GMP. Calculate it quickly and let me know. Anybody. The site was inspected in 2022 September 16. GMP is valid till 3 years minus 1 day. So it's quick math. No, I think Vaishnavi, you're trying to tell me it's valid till 15 September 2025. Okay? Not 2027. 3 years, I said. Yeah, so this GMP is valid till 2025. But there's a twist. So, okay. This GMP is for your human medicinal products. It's written here human medicinal products. If it is for a veterinary product, veterinary products will be written here. If it is for investigational medicinal product, it will be mentioned here. Okay. Then is your manufacturing operations, all the manufacturing operations that are being conducted at this site. For non-sterile products, non-sterile products are your capsules, liquids, tablets, etc. Batch certification is being provided at this site. Then biological medicinal products. See, as you can see, the 1.1 section is not present here because that activity is not conducted at this specific site. So starts with 1.2, which covers non-sterile products. Then is your biological medicinal products, and packaging is also done here, and quality control testing is done here. Important medicinal products. For them, quality control testing of imported medicinal product and other importation activities is being conducted here. It's not always important that one manufacturing site will conduct all the manufacturing activities. Instead, it can outsource the manufacturing activities like labeling to another third party, or laboratory testing to another third party. Trials can be conducted at a different site. So if a site is inspected and a GMP certificate is issued, it needs to make sure that all the activities that are conducted there are mentioned in the GMP certificate, right? This is what your GMP certificate looks like. But if there is any clarifying remark that needs to be mentioned, it's mentioned here. So if you read the clarifying remark, it says the validity period of the certificate is extended until 16 September 2027, which means that this GMP is valid till 16 September 2027. Why is this? Why has this happened? Um, Maybe inspection must be conducted, and there were no changes. So instead of issuing a new GMP certificate, they chose to add a clarifying remark for public users here to make sure that this GMP certificate, to make the public understand that this GMP certificate is valid till September 2027, despite the fact that it was inspected in 2022. Okay, so this is something that you should always read when you're reading a GMP certificate. There are a lot of clarifying remarks which either extends the validity of the GMP certificate or tells us about what other activities are being conducted which are not mentioned in the above tables, etc. There are a lot of things that are mentioned in the clarifying remarks. For example, the manufacturing of immunological product 1312. Do we have 1312? We have 1312 is restricted to obtaining intermediate product. So here they are telling us that the manufacturing of immunological products only deals with obtaining the intermediate product. They do not deal with the final product or anything. So this is again also very important to make sure that you know when you're referring to immunological products, only the intermediate product is being obtained here. Then the biological control, which is your 1.6.4, is restricted to individual antigenic valences and mixed antigenic valences intermediate product. Again, we talk about intermediate product and we're not talking about the final product. Okay. Then signatory Ms. Florence Discamps Delcel, head of the Pharmaceutical Product Inspection and Counterfeiting Flight Department. The ANSM does not issue flight department. Okay, so this is then signed by a person, authorized person of the competent authority of France. What is the competent authority of France? Can anybody give me the name? For example, we have authorities like PMDA, Japan, TGA, Australia. What is the competent authority of France? It's written on the GMP itself. If you read it, can anyone tell me in the chat box? Okay, for France, it's National Agency for the Safety of Medicine and Healthcare Product, also referred to as ANSM. Not AMF, it's ANSM. ANSM. Okay, so ANSM is the competent authority of France who's issued this GMP to Mylan Laboratories France. And if Udra GMP is not acceptable by the regulatory bodies in different countries where the product needs to be registered, then we go to the manufacturing plant, ask them for a signed GMP document, get it notarized, legalized, whatever the whatever the requirement is for the regulatory authority where the product is going to be registered. We do that with the GMP certificates and submit it to the health authority. Okay. So this is it about GMP certificate. It's ANSM. Okay. I hope there are no questions so far. And if you have any questions, you can write them in chat box. We'll wrap the class here. If you have any questions, you can note them down for the next class. We will talk about US FDA in the next class. We will talk about European Medicine Agency in the next class. So I hope it was a nice interactive session. You can all exit the meeting. I'll see you in the next class. Thank you so much.